It's roof mount season. Hit the music. Hello and welcome to the Adding Energy Podcast, a podcast about energy usage, energy efficiency, and energy issues. I'm your host, Mick Lane, but you can call me Sir. It's roof mount season. What does that mean? Mostly that there's frozen stuff on roofs. I'm not trying to get into things like ice dams, but what I want to do is I want to talk about roof melt to talk about thermal imaging. What do I mean when I say thermal imaging? There's a company called FLIR. Most of the people who deal with thermal imaging, surface temperature imagery, that's the company that they think of. And there's a good chance that it says that on a piece of equipment if you're using it. Why do we use thermal imaging? Well, you can learn some information by taking an image of like a house. Now, it isn't necessarily as helpful as we think. So if we took a picture of, say, the gable end of a house, you would see various things. You would see a very warm chimney. You would see warm windows. You would see siding at various temperatures. Now, depending on the actual construction that you're looking at, you might see the wall temperature increase slightly as it gets closer to the top of the wall, assuming it's hot inside, cold outside. You might see changes at the soffits. You might see changes at the floors or where there's walls or knee walls. All those things can tell you things about your building, but you probably already know most of those. What are we looking for when we're looking at thermal imagery? We're looking for when the rules don't apply. So if you had taken some pictures basically right after sunrise, before you had direct sun on your walls, ran around your house when the house has been up to temperature for a good amount of time, really cold, still morning, go around, take all those pictures, and you're looking for where you don't see what you think you should see. So, yes, your windows are going to be warm. Your doors are going to be warm. Your plumbing vents are going to be warm. What you're looking for is where a wall that should be all the same temperature isn't. Generally, when we see that, we start to infer certain things. If the wall is warmer from the outside than it normally would be, or than the wall around it is, we assume that there's warm or conditioned air getting into that cavity. If it's colder than the wall around it, we assume that there's cold air or outdoor air getting into that cavity. Now, that might not be right. That might be wrong. There's also things that go on that make your thermal images just about useless. If your siding is air-spaced, which means maybe they put furring strips up on the house and then mounted the siding to that, if the back of the siding can breathe, it should basically all be outdoor temperature. So you just took a whole bunch of pictures and you learned nothing. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because what I don't want to happen is for you guys to see this, go call all my cohorts who do energy efficiency, possible thermal imaging, and say, hey, I need you to come over to my house and take pictures on a nice cold morning when I have the temperature up right around sunrise so that I can see where my insulation's better or worse in my house or where the cable guy messed stuff up. They're not going to want to do that. Mostly because I know about how much you're going to offer them, and I know how much they would normally need for something like that. Something like that, if you're actually going to call somebody, they're going to give you a number in the neighborhood of $250 to come over and take some pictures. Now, why is that? Because number one, you're trying to take the first appointment of the day, which is usually a pretty nice appointment. You're asking them to use a very expensive piece of technology to tell you a little bit of information that's probably not going to turn into any actual work for them. Because when they realize that your house is not insulated correctly or continuously or whatever, when they tell you it's going to be $10,000 to fix, you're not going to spend that. Because you would never save $10,000 by fixing your insulation. Well, potentially you could. It's unlikely that you would save enough energy to warrant spending $10,000 to fix some insulation. What you would do is you would take that information, and the next time you do a project, you could adjust it to add energy efficiency to that project. So maybe if you're redoing a bathroom or a bedroom or the kitchen, you might add into that project fixing some insulation, doing some air sealing, or whatever might be appropriate to fix the thing that's showing up on your thermal imaging. Now, so you're not actually going to call all my friends and ask these questions. There is a first date version that is much less costly. Now, here's the problem. You need to live in a place that's cold. You need to wait for a thick frost or a mild amount of snow with no wind. And then you have to get up early and go outside and see what it did to your roof. So here's a picture of a pretty innocuous house. And there's a few things I want to point out that are going on there. One of the things is that there is a very thick form layer of snow in one spot. And then there is slightly melted snow under it, and then more melted snow on top of it. That means that somebody did a little bonus room slope ceiling knee wall situation. And by this, I can tell that they did a very good job insulating where the sloped ceiling was. It does not appear that they did a good job insulating above the flat portion of the ceiling, and that they have some thermal leakage getting up into the eaves. So either those knee walls are not insulated or not insulated correctly, or the ceiling below that portion of roof is not insulated. Next one we have, there's a few things going on. In that one, you get a bunch of different types of roof melt. So the first thing is you get a hot spot. Now, we don't know why there's a hot spot. If I had to guess, the change in roof line where the lower roof line intersects to the upper roof line, that framing is generally pretty complicated. And I'm guessing that when they did the framing, that they made it impossible to insulate. They could also put in something like an electrical box or a light fixture or something else that's causing a bunch of roof melt. That's not that crazy. Next one, we have a little bit of roof melt at the very top of the roof. Now, there's a good chance that there's something underneath it in the house that's lining up where either the wall board is not done correctly, and so there is heat coming up through the insulation in the middle up there, or where they tied in the framing for that roof that comes off the front of the house. That framing made it impossible to insulate correctly, so they're getting roof melt there at the top. Here's another one. This is another one where you're looking at a fairly similar type of addition. And you can tell where they tied in the lower roof to the upper roof, and with all that framing going on, nobody insulated it correctly. So you get all kinds of different derivations of roof melt caused by deficiencies in construction, insulation, or air sealing. So when you go out and take pictures of your house, you'll see things like these, or you'll see other things. The first thing that I always look for is I look for where the exterior wall would intersect the roof. I look at that all the way around the perimeter of the roof. So if you have a 12-inch overhang, you're basically looking 12 inches in from the edge. And you normally see little circles or little lines of melt. Those can become from very commonplace is where an interior wall intersects an exterior wall. And the way you frame to put up the drywall makes it impossible to come back after the framing's done and insulate that portion where that wall intersects that exterior wall. Another very common thing is if you see roof melt in the vicinity of your front door, if it's a little spot of melt to the doorknob side of the door, that's usually because there's a switch as soon as you get in the door and an outdoor light on the wall. and one of those things is not done great, so you have warm air coming in through the light switch or air going out the light fixture, and the warm air is coming up and hitting the roof as it comes up through, either where the wire comes through the penetration or just where there's some room around the framing for your door. You will also have melt where maybe walls intersect. One of my favorite places to find is the light above the kitchen sink, because those became very popular 30, 40 years ago, and nobody did them great. And there's a very common thing to have warm air going up through that light box, fixture, can, whatever happens to be there, and melting the roof right above it. Likewise, any soffits above a tub, soffit above cabinets, soffits to hide some ductwork here or there, those tend to be insulated incorrectly, and so you usually see roof melt with those things. So again, are you going to see this roof melt and then decide you're going to rip apart huge portions of your house to insulate properly? No. What you're going to do is you're going to look for a couple spots where you see excessive amounts of roof melt that are appropriate or that are inappropriate, and you're going to include in projects where you're working in those areas correcting insulation, correcting air sealing, correcting blocking. So it's roof melt season. Wait for some snow. Go out, take a picture. Feel free to throw it up on Twitter. Tag me in it by adding energy, and shooting me an email, gmail.com, or post in the comments below. For the Adding Energy podcast, I'm your host, Mick Lane.